Every empath begins with a wound. Behind the sensitivity, behind the intuition, behind the capacity to feel others so deeply, lies a story of pain. Carl Jung understood this paradox well. The gift of empathy is often born from trauma. As children, empaths learn to sense shifts in mood, to detect unspoken tension, to anticipate the needs of others because their safety depends on it. What looks like a gift in adulthood often begins as survival in childhood. But here is the danger. If left unexamined, the empath's wound becomes their prison. Their entire identity can fuse with suffering, either their own or the suffering of others. They live in hyper-attunement, absorbing emotions like sponges, confusing compassion with self-sacrifice. Instead of wielding their gift, they are ruled by it. And predators, especially narcissists, exploit this weakness with ruthless precision. Jung called this the stage of the wounded empath. It is a stage marked by confusion, self-abandonment, and endless giving. The wounded empath feels noble for carrying others' burdens, but beneath the surface lies exhaustion, resentment, and the quiet despair of never being seen or valued. Their empathy is compulsive, driven less by love and more by fear, the fear of rejection, abandonment, or conflict. Left unhealed, the wounded empath becomes easy prey. Narcissists, manipulators, and energy vampires sense their permeability. The empath gives, hoping to earn love, but receives only depletion. They become trapped in cycles of toxic relationships, their wound deepening each time. But Jung saw another possibility, one far more powerful. He believed that when the empath faces their wound directly, when they stop running from their pain and begin integrating their shadow, a transformation begins. The empath moves from being ruled by sensitivity to mastering it, from being victim to becoming warrior. This transformation is not gentle. It requires the empath to descend into themselves, to confront the parts they deny: anger, selfishness, boundaries, even cruelty. Jung insisted that true wholeness is not light alone. It is the union of light and dark. For the empath, this means reclaiming the shadow they've buried in order to remain good. Without this integration, empathy remains weakness. With it, empathy becomes strength. The path from wounded to warrior is therefore an alchemical process. It burns away illusions, strips false identities, and demands the death of the old self. What emerges is something entirely new. An empath who no longer bleeds for everyone, but who chooses consciously when to give, when to protect, and when to walk away. This, Jung believed, is the rise of the warrior empath. An individual both tender and unshakable, compassionate and sovereign, attuned yet impenetrable, a force the world cannot exploit, because they have turned their deepest wound into their sharpest weapon. Jung often described the wounded empath as living in a constant state of psychic permeability. They absorb emotions indiscriminately, unable to distinguish what belongs to them and what belongs to others. In his notes, he compared them to psychic sponges soaking up pain, joy, fear, and anger from their environment until they drown in emotions not their own. This permeability begins innocently enough. As children, many empaths learned that anticipating others' moods was the key to survival. If a parent was volatile, the child learned to sense shifts before they exploded. If a caregiver was distant, the child amplified sensitivity in hopes of winning affection. Over time, hyper-attunement became second nature. What was once a survival mechanism calcified into identity, but in adulthood, this survival strategy turns against them. The wounded empath often doesn't know where they end, and another begins. They feel responsible for fixing everyone's pain, mistaking martyrdom for love. Their boundaries are so blurred that they collapse under the weight of carrying emotions that were never theirs to hold. Jung warned that this over-identification with suffering keeps empaths trapped in cycles of victimhood. Because they fear abandonment, they overgive. Because they overgive, they attract takers. And because they attract takers, they are abandoned again, confirming their deepest fear. The cycle reinforces itself, each loop carving the wound deeper. Yet Jung also saw that this same sensitivity, when refined, could become a profound strength. He called it conscious permeability, the ability to feel deeply, but with discernment. The difference between the wounded empath and the warrior empath is choice. The wounded empath absorbs unconsciously, while the warrior empath chooses what to allow in and what to deflect. The transition between the two begins with shadow work. Jung emphasized that empaths must confront the parts of themselves they've disowned. Many empaths repress anger, believing it makes them bad. But by rejecting anger, they also reject boundaries. They repress selfishness, but in doing so, they erase self-care. They repress assertiveness, But this silences their truth. The shadow holds all these traits, waiting to be integrated. When the empath begins reclaiming these denied qualities, they start to balance sensitivity with strength. Anger transforms into boundary setting. Selfishness becomes self-preservation. Assertiveness evolves into authentic expression. Slowly, the empath discovers they can still care deeply without losing themselves in the process. Jung saw this as a turning point, the shift from compulsion to consciousness. Empathy ceases to be a reflex and becomes a deliberate act, no longer a wound dictating behavior. It becomes a gift wielded with precision. This is where the first glimmer of the warrior empath appears. The empath still feels deeply, but no longer drowns. They can witness another's suffering without making it their own. They can love without collapsing. They can give without being emptied. The wound remains, but it is no longer a prison. It is becoming a forge. Jung identified 3 major thresholds an empath must cross in order to transform from the wounded stage into the warrior stage. Each threshold represents a kind of symbolic death, the end of an old identity and the birth of something stronger. The first threshold is the death of the savior complex. Wounded empaths often believe their role is to rescue others, to heal every broken soul they encounter. They confuse love with sacrifice, compassion with martyrdom. But Jung insisted that this compulsion to save is rooted not in pure empathy, but in fear of being unloved if they stop giving. Crossing this threshold means letting go of the illusion that love can fix everyone. It means recognizing that some people choose their wounds, and no amount of empathy can alter that choice. The second threshold is the death of external validation. For many empaths, identity is constructed through others' approval. They feel valuable only when praised for their kindness or sacrifice. But this creates dependency, leaving them vulnerable to manipulation. To cross this threshold is to sever the link between worth and validation. The warrior empath does not need applause to know their value. Their worth is intrinsic, untouchable by praise or criticism. The third threshold is the death of innocence. Wounded empaths often cling to the belief that people are inherently good, that with enough patience, everyone can be trusted. But this naivete makes them easy prey for narcissists and manipulators. Jung argued that true wholeness comes not from denying darkness, but from acknowledging it, both in others and in oneself. Crossing this threshold means seeing clearly that cruelty exists, that manipulation exists, and that one must guard against it without losing compassion. Each threshold feels like a loss. To stop saving feels like betrayal of identity. To stop needing validation feels like emptiness. To stop believing in universal goodness feels like cynicism. But Jung explained that these deaths are necessary births. They strip away illusions that enslave the empath, leaving behind a clearer, stronger self. At this stage, the empath begins to reclaim their power. They no longer rush to heal everyone. They no longer live and die by praise. They no longer confuse trust with blindness. Instead, they begin walking with sharper eyes, firmer boundaries, and a deeper connection to their own center. Jung wrote that those who pass through these deaths emerge with a gaze that unsettles others. They see too clearly, too deeply. Their presence alone exposes manipulation. Their silence feels like truth. This is the beginning of the warrior empath's presence. Not louder, but sharper, not harder, but unshakably whole. The empath who has crossed these thresholds is no longer the same. The wound still exists, but it no longer dictates their life. It has become the foundation of their strength. Jung compared the empath's transformation to alchemy. In alchemy, the base metal must be broken down, dissolved, and burned before it can be transmuted into gold. In the same way, the wounded empath must endure the breaking apart of old identities, illusions, and defenses before their essence can be forged into something indestructible. He described this as the journey through the negredo, the dark night of the soul. For the empath, this often looks like a period of deep isolation. After realizing they can no longer live as the endless giver, they step back from relationships, jobs, and communities that once defined them. They may feel misunderstood, even abandoned. The old life crumbles, but the new has not yet taken shape. This stage is brutal. Many empaths describe it as emptiness, an in-between space, where they no longer know who they are. Jung insisted this void is necessary. The false self, built on compulsive empathy and endless sacrifice, must die. Only in the emptiness can a new identity rooted in sovereignty emerge. During this stage, shadow work intensifies. The empath must confront everything they once disowned, the anger they denied, the selfishness they buried, the boundaries they feared to set. All of it rises to the surface. At first, this feels terrifying. To acknowledge anger may feel like becoming bad. To admit selfishness may feel like betrayal. But Jung reassured his patients that these qualities are not evil. They are necessary. Integrated properly, they become tools of survival and authenticity. As this integration unfolds, the empath begins to notice subtle changes. Where they once felt responsible for every room's emotional temperature, they now pause and ask, is this mine to carry? Where they once rushed to comfort, they now discern, do they want healing or do they want a rescuer? Where they once dissolved in others' pain, they now stand steady, offering compassion without collapse. This is what Jung called conscious permeability. It is the ability to choose what enters and what does not. The empath does not shut down. They remain open, but their openness is no longer compulsive. It is sovereign. They are not a sponge, but a filter, aware and deliberate. At this point, the wounded empath begins to feel their first taste of power. They realize that empathy, when wielded with boundaries, is not depletion but strength. They can walk into toxic environments without being consumed. They can detect manipulation without being ensnared. They can say no without guilt. And slowly, they understand. Their wound has not disappeared, but it has been transmuted. What was once weakness is becoming resilience. What was once a burden is becoming a weapon. The empath is no longer just surviving. They are beginning to fight back. This is the dawn of the warrior empath. As the empath steps into this warrior stage, their presence begins to change. People who once relied on their endless giving may now feel unsettled. Friends who expected constant availability accuse them of being cold or selfish. Family members who once leaned on their emotional labor may resent their new boundaries. Even partners who benefited from their self-sacrifice may resist their transformation. Jung noted that this backlash is predictable. When an empath evolves, the systems that thrived on their weakness are disrupted. But instead of collapsing under guilt, the warrior empath holds steady. They realize that every accusation reveals not their cruelty, but others' dependency. Boundaries expose the imbalance that was always there. This stage requires courage. The warrior empath must endure the loneliness of losing old dynamics before new ones appear. Jung compared it to shedding skin, uncomfortable, vulnerable, but necessary for growth. Many empaths mistake this loneliness as regression, but it is actually progress. The emptiness is space being cleared for relationships built on respect, not exploitation. At the same time, the warrior empath discovers a new ability, the capacity to see through masks. Having faced their own shadow, they now recognize the shadows of others with startling clarity. Lies, manipulation, and hidden motives become transparent. Jung described this as archetypal sight, the ability to see beyond the persona into the deeper psyche. But this gift comes with a challenge. The empath may find ordinary conversations unbearable. Small talk feels hollow. Hidden agendas stand out like flashing lights. The warrior empath must learn discernment. Not every truth needs to be spoken. Not every mask needs to be torn away. Mastery lies not just in seeing, but in knowing when to act and when to remain silent. Jung emphasized that this restraint is the true mark of the warrior. Power without control becomes destruction. The warrior empath, unlike the narcissist, does not exploit their insight. They use it with precision, sometimes to protect, sometimes to guide, sometimes to walk away. Silence becomes one of their sharpest weapons, unsettling manipulators more than confrontation ever could. In this stage, empathy transforms from compulsion into choice. The warrior empath chooses when to engage, when to withdraw, and when to let go. They understand that compassion without boundaries is self-betrayal, but boundaries without compassion are emptiness. The power lies in holding both, and with this balance comes sovereignty. The warrior empath no longer fears rejection, betrayal, or misunderstanding. They have faced these wounds within themselves, and so the external sting loses its power. They walk through the world open yet unshakable, tender yet armored, giving yet whole. This is the empath who has crossed the fire and emerged not diminished, but forged. One of Jung's most striking observations was that warrior empaths often radiate a paradoxical presence. They are calm, but not passive, gentle, but not weak, silent, but not submissive. Their very existence unsettles people because they embody what most fear, a person who cannot be controlled by guilt, manipulation, or approval. This presence comes from integration. Unlike the wounded empath, who denies their shadow, the warrior empath has embraced it. They know their capacity for anger, selfishness, and even cruelty. But instead of fearing these qualities, they have harnessed them. Anger becomes a boundary. Selfishness becomes self-care, and the recognition of cruelty becomes discernment. Because they no longer run from their darkness, no one can use it against them. Jung described this as psychic sovereignty. It is a state where the empath is no longer porous to every emotional storm. They are present, attuned, but also rooted. Their empathy is no longer compulsive, but intentional. They can witness pain without drowning, offer love without erasing themselves, and remain open without being devoured. This sovereignty changes how they interact with the world. In toxic environments, they remain grounded while others spiral. In conflicts, their silence carries more weight than arguments. In relationships, they offer support without losing balance. People sense this shift and react strongly, some with respect, others with fear. But sovereignty is not isolation. Warrior empaths are not detached monks living above the fray of human life. On the contrary, they engage more fully than ever before. Because they are no longer enslaved by fear of rejection or betrayal. They take risks others avoid. They love more freely, create more boldly, and stand more firmly in truth. Their wholeness liberates them to live fully. Yet, this stage comes with its own burden, what Jung called the consciousness gap. The warrior empath sees clearly what others deny. They recognize patterns of manipulation, cycles of self-deception, and collective shadows playing out in families, communities, even societies. This vision can be isolating because few are ready to face such truths. To navigate this gap, Jung advised channeling insight into creation. Art, writing, leadership, or healing become outlets for the warrior empath's depth. Expression bridges the gap, allowing their wisdom to reach others without overwhelming them. In this way, the empath transforms from silent witness into guide. The rise of the warrior empath, then, is not just personal. It has collective implications. Jung believed such individuals serve as bridges between the conscious and unconscious of humanity. They embody what is possible when wounds are transformed into strength, and their presence becomes a living reminder that integration, not avoidance, is the path to wholeness. The warrior empath is no longer a victim of their sensitivity. They are its master. And in that mastery, they become unstoppable. As the empath matures into the warrior stage, they often face a new paradox. Their power isolates them, yet also makes them a magnet for those seeking guidance. Jung noted that such individuals naturally attract others, not because they try to rescue anymore, but because their presence radiates stability. People feel safer, calmer, even more authentic in their company. But with this attraction comes responsibility. The warrior empath must resist slipping back into the old savior role. Instead of rescuing, they now model boundaries. Instead of absorbing, they now mirror. Instead of sacrificing, they now inspire. Jung insisted that true leadership arises not from control, but from example. The warrior empath leads by living truth, not preaching it. One of the most significant qualities of this stage is discernment in silence. The warrior empath knows when to speak and when to remain quiet. They understand that silence can disarm a manipulator more than argument, and that words spoken from sovereignty cut deeper than endless explanations. Silence, once a symptom of repression in the wounded stage, becomes a weapon of power in the warrior stage. Jung compared this to the archetype of the sage, or seer. These figures did not convince through volume, but through presence. A single word, after long silence, carried more weight than 1,000 shouted arguments. The warrior empath embodies this same energy. Their restraint creates gravity. Their stillness commands attention. But this strength is not without trial. Jung warned of archetypal inflation, the danger of identifying too strongly with the role of healer, warrior, or guide. Some empaths, intoxicated by their own transformation, fall into superiority. They believe they are beyond shadow, beyond human weakness. Ironically, this delusion pulls them back into shadow's grip. To guard against this, Jung emphasized humility. The warrior empath must remember, they are not invincible. They are integrated. Pain still comes, wounds still open, shadows still rise. But unlike before, these experiences no longer control them. Mastery is not perfection. It is continual return to balance. In practical life, this looks like resilience. The warrior empath faces betrayal without collapse, criticism without defensiveness, and loss without despair. They grieve, but they do not shatter. They get angry, but they do not lose themselves in rage. They feel fear, but they move forward anyway. Their humanity remains, but it is humanity fortified by wholeness. At this point, the empath is no longer just surviving their gift. They are wielding it. Their sensitivity, once a curse, has become their greatest strength. They are both healer and warrior, mirror and shield, open heart and unshakable core. This is the unstoppable rise Jung foresaw, the empath who transcends victimhood to become a sovereign force of consciousness. Jung believed that the rise of the warrior empath is not only a personal triumph, but a collective necessity. In a world drowning in noise, manipulation, and division, such individuals act as anchors of clarity. They remind humanity of what it means to feel deeply without being consumed, to stand firm without becoming cruel, to integrate shadow without losing light. The warrior empath represents the possibility of a new kind of strength, one that does not dominate, but liberates. Unlike the narcissist, who thrives on control, the warrior empath thrives on authenticity. Unlike the manipulator, who hides behind masks, the warrior empath strips them away. Unlike the herd, who seeks safety in conformity, the warrior empath chooses sovereignty, even at the cost of loneliness. This does not mean the warrior empath lives free of pain. Pain still comes, but it no longer defines them. Rejection still stings, but it no longer enslaves. Betrayal still wounds, but it no longer destroys. What changes is the relationship to pain. It becomes teacher, not master. Every hardship is fuel, every trial a forge, every shadow an invitation to deeper wholeness. This resilience makes warrior empaths powerful agents of transformation. In relationships, they break cycles of dependency by modeling boundaries. In communities, they expose dysfunction by refusing to play unconscious games. In society, they embody integrity in a world addicted to masks. Their very presence challenges the systems that thrive on exploitation, because they can no longer be manipulated. But Jung also reminded us that the warrior empath is not the end of the journey. Integration is ongoing. Shadows resurface, old wounds whisper. The task is not to arrive at perfection, but to live in continual balance. The warrior empath does not transcend humanity. They embrace it fully, its joy and sorrow, its beauty and cruelty, its light and dark. Perhaps this is why Jung saw the warrior empath as a prototype for the future of consciousness. Humanity cannot survive by denial of shadow or by indulgence in victimhood. It survives by integration, by individuals willing to face the darkness within themselves and emerge whole. The warrior empath is proof that such integration is possible, that wounds can become weapons, and that sensitivity can coexist with sovereignty. In this sense, the empath's rise from wounded to warrior is not just their story. It is ours. It is the story of humanity learning to move beyond suffering without abandoning feeling, to wield compassion without collapsing into sacrifice, to rise beyond the shadow without pretending it doesn't exist. The warrior empath shows us what it means to be both human and whole. The empath's journey, as Jung envisioned it, is nothing less than alchemy of the soul. From wounded to warrior, from porous victim to sovereign force, the empath transforms not by escaping pain, but by integrating it. The wound does not vanish. It becomes the forge of resilience, the birthplace of strength. The warrior empath embodies a paradox, open yet unshakable, compassionate yet boundaried, tender yet powerful. They walk through the world no longer at the mercy of manipulation, because they have claimed the shadow within. Their empathy is no longer compulsion, but choice, no longer depletion, but presence. And this is the final gift, to live as proof that suffering can be transmuted into sovereignty, to show others, by example, that it is possible to feel deeply without being broken, to face darkness without losing light, to rise beyond shadow into wholeness. This is the empath's unstoppable rise. If this message resonates, support our channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Join us as we continue exploring Jung's wisdom and the extraordinary strength born from wounds transformed into power.